Hi everyone, this is my case study for EDL 853. It's called Get This Child Out of My Room. So first I'm going to start by talking about what is the problem in this case. So first, what I already know. So first I described what I already know about the school, which is the Schuyler School. It's a rural school which is in a really small 250-person town. They have limited resources in terms of administrators and special education resources. And they have a part-time superintendent, which was kind of an interesting concept for me of not having a principal and having a part-time superintendent instead. And they are part of a cooperative network where they get additional resources and share them with other school districts. The people who are going to be important to this case study are also worth noting that we know who they are and what they are all about. So Ms. Susan Green is a special education teacher, and she is a first-year teacher. Mrs. Nancy Taylor is the third grade classroom teacher, and Carl Hughes is a student in her class that has a lot of trouble with aggressive behavior. Mr. and Mrs. Hughes are Carl's parents, and it's also important to know that they are divorced. And Mrs. Willis is the district special education coordinator, and then there is an unnamed superintendent and assistant superintendent. And the assistant superintendent is in the building full-time, but they are a teacher who has additional responsibilities. Other things I know is that Carl's behavior has escalated from self-aggression to aggression towards others in the last few weeks. He's a third grader, and what has previously been a problem for him is self-aggression, but now he has had some other issues and his old behavior plan is not working. Ms. Green is a special education teacher, and she plans her plan that she has created for Carl is to remove him from the general education environment whenever he is displaying these really aggressive behaviors, help him calm down, and then have him return to class. Mrs. Taylor, the classroom teacher, is not satisfied with this plan. She's basically not having any of that, and she wants Carl removed a lot more often from her room. Mr. and Mrs. Hughes are Carl's parents, and they are going through a tough personal time with a seemingly very messy divorce. What I need to know, so I need some more information about what resources are available for students with aggressive behaviors, maybe through the district or maybe even in the community. So how could family maybe receive support outside of school within the community? I'm in this case looking for a district social worker was mentioned in the case study, which I think would be really good to seek out in this case. And then maybe is there any sort of counseling or any, family counseling practice like that in the area? What other staff members are available in the building to help implement a behavior plan? So when Mrs. Willis helped Ms. Green create this plan, she mentioned that you might need a male staff member to help restrain Carl if he ever needs restraint because he's a bigger kid, and it might require somebody more physically imposing to restrain him. And then I also need to know if Mrs. Taylor is going to accept this new plan and help implement it, or if she is going to kind of be a roadblock along the way. So the problem is that Carl Hughes is showing aggressive behavior in school, and that is endangering his classmates and his teachers, and then there's conflict over how to handle his behavior. So this is my plan that I developed. In this case, I kind of acted as if I was the superintendent in this school. So the first thing I would do is review the available resources that I have. So like I said, there was a district social worker mentioned. I also wonder if there's a counselor available anywhere who could maybe work with Carl, and that could be part of his behavior plan is seeing these sorts of professionals. I also would seek out community resources. Maybe there's something I could recommend to the family. Obviously, I can't make a family go to counseling, but maybe if I provide resources, a family might be interested in that. The next thing I would do is talk to Carl. I know it was mentioned in the case that he is not really able to explain why he's being aggressive or explain his behaviors, but I'm wondering if you talked to him on a day when he was just having a normal day at school and he had not had an outburst and he hadn't had any trouble that day, if he would be more willing and open to talk. I also would be interested what his feelings are on his home life and his family, because I feel like that might reveal a lot of the causes of these problems. And then I think asking him what would help him might be a nice step. And if he doesn't know, then we can proceed. But if he does know something that would help him, then I think that we should listen to him. The next thing I would do is call a meeting between all the relevant staff members in this case, which are Mrs. Taylor, Ms. Green, the assistant superintendent in the building, and the superintendent. I would review the plan that was created for Carl's behavior and make sure that everybody is getting on the same page. It currently seems like there's a lot of tension between Ms. Green and Mrs. Taylor, and we need to get rid of that if we're going to proceed forward and be helpful to our students. In this meeting, I would make sure everyone knows their roles and their responsibilities within this behavior plan. Also, if we need an additional person to help support this plan, like was mentioned earlier, then we need to go find that person. So the next part of the plan is to recruit additional staff members. So one, we need somebody, if we're going to be restraining Carl, we need somebody who's trained in those restraint techniques because not everybody is legally allowed to do those. And we also need somebody who, like I said, has the physical stature to be able to restrain Carl. And then we also need to make sure that anybody who needs to know about this plan is informed of this plan. So not everybody in the building needs to know of Carl's behavior plan, but someone like Carl's PE teacher or a librarian that he goes to multiple times a week. Those people would need to know because they're in a direct supervision role for Carl. I would meet with Carl's parents again and discuss Carl's well-being. So it seemed like there was a lot of strife during the IEP meeting between the parents. So I would like to meet with the parents outside of the IEP meeting and just talk about Carl and say, what can we do to help Carl? It seemed like there wasn't really a lot of conversation about that in the IEP meeting, so I think maybe we need a new meeting for this. I would talk to them about the available resources. So is there a social worker that can help Carl? Is there some outside of the school option that maybe the family could consider? And providing those resources, I think, would really be helpful to this family. And then if there is anything that comes up throughout this process, either from Carl, from his parents, from staff members, that means that this behavior plan is not going to work, then we would need to revise the behavior plan. And then I also mentioned implementing any necessary training, like especially restraint training, or if Mrs. Taylor needs additional training in how to handle a student with emotional problems in her class, then maybe she needs to get some additional training too. And then finally, the last thing is to actually execute this plan. So not just say, oh yeah, we have this plan for this kid, but to truly follow the requirements of the plan. So I'm going to talk about how I went about resolving this issue and promoting student success for all students in the building. So I respected Carl's need for success by not removing him excessively from the environment. This made sure that he wasn't overly secluded and he could still access the curriculum like he needed to. Carl will likely benefit from a functional behavior plan and appropriate services if he's getting seen by a counselor, if he's able to be successful in class. That's really going to help him out. And then other students and teachers are also going to be safer and have better learning environment if his behavior is improved. So if the class isn't being disrupted every day by Carl's behavior outbursts, then everybody in the entire class is going to have a better chance of success in school. So this is my debrief, which is category 4. So during this case, I was thinking a number of different things, but first I was just trying to think of what's the best possible solution, and I was mostly focusing on what's the best possible solution for Carl. I was also trying to think about what resources could be helpful to Carl and also his family. In the case, it mentioned that he had 2 older siblings that were also struggling, so as a superintendent, you would think that you would also be somewhat concerned for the older siblings as well. And then how understanding and increased instructional capacity could potentially improve this situation. So I think that Mrs. Taylor needs to be a little bit more understanding. And I think that we could all be more understanding of Carl. Clearly, he's going through a rough time in his life. And so how can we help Carl should be our really big focus. And thinking about how we can become better teachers to help him is really what we should be doing. This case could be really, really frustrating, I feel like, as a superintendent, but I was feeling an understanding for Carl because he is dealing with kind of a stressful family environment, and I feel like that's definitely impacting his behavior. I guess I won't say definitely, I will say likely impacting his behavior. I'm also feeling sympathy for Carl because of this, and also for Carl's mom. So Carl's mom during the IEP meeting kind of broke down. She seemed like she was kind of out of options. She didn't really know what to do for Carl. And that reminded me of the interview that I did with my principal for one of the earlier modules in this course. And he mentioned to me that he feels like as an administrator, his role is sometimes to almost counsel parents and say, this is not, you don't need to be hopeless for your kid. Mrs. Hughes seems like she's pretty much at the end of her rope. And the principal the superintendent in this case, kind of needs to walk her back off the ledge and say, it's going to be okay. How can we best help Carl? And then I'm also feeling frustrated that Mrs. Taylor seems not to really care about Carl and his well-being and is really only concerned about everybody else, it seems like. I was valuing a number of different things as well. I put the justice scales on this page just because I feel like I was valuing justice. So I was valuing Carl's rights to the least restrictive learning environment. It's mentioned in the case study that Carl doesn't have any intellectual challenges or academic challenges, so we don't need to remove him full-time to a different environment. It's going to hurt him academically, and that's not what he needs. I'm also valuing Carl's feelings and his opinions. I want to talk to Carl and find out what he thinks might help him. If he can't tell me, because he's a little kid, so if he can't tell me what's going to help him, that's okay. But I want to ask. I think that we need to be respectful of people who we are creating these behavior plans for. I'm also thinking about the safety and well-being of all students in the school. So I can't have Carl throwing things across the room or throwing rocks at bus drivers. That can't be happening. It's not safe for anybody. So I'm figuring out how can we keep this from happening so that everybody is safe. And then I'm also valuing collaboration and team efforts. So if Ms. Green and Mrs. Taylor are not able to work together to implement this plan, then it's not going to be successful. I'm also valuing the opinion of Carl, the opinion of a social worker, the opinion of his parents. I really want everybody in on this. I don't want this to kind of be a one-man show. I want everybody to be involved in this plan. As for unresolved issues, there's obviously the issue of, is Mrs. Taylor going to get on board and implement this plan with fidelity, or is she going to kind of brush it off, put it off on Miss Green, just kind of ignore the behavior plan? So is Mrs. Taylor going to jump on board? The second question that I still don't know is, are there going to be community resources that are going to assist the Hughes family, and is the Hughes family going to be open to those resources? So sometimes you'll have parents say, no, my kid cannot talk to the social worker, which I think is unfortunate, but that is within their rights as parents. So, maybe parents aren't going to be open to resources for Carl, though it seems like they probably are. And then finally, is this behavior plan going to work? Sometimes you lay out a really good plan, but it just doesn't work. So I think that another unresolved issue in this case is you're going to have to keep paying attention to, is this behavior plan working? And if it's not, how can we change it to make it work? And the last category is reflection. So how I promoted academic success is, first off, that relationship between the staff. I need to make sure that these two teachers are working together, because it's going to hurt not only Carl, but also the rest of the students if they can't work together. Removing Carl from the class, like I said, would take away his access to the curriculum and to instruction, and so I don't want to do that because it's not the least restrictive environment for him to learn in. And then Carl consistently disturbing the class also hurts the learning environment and the academic success of everybody else. So I want to improve the instruction in the room by decreasing Carl's negative behaviors. As for personal well-being, I'm also working with teachers to make sure that we are taking care of everybody and making sure everybody is safe and emotionally happy at school. So talking to Carl and valuing his opinions and letting him know that I care and getting him the appropriate resources could really help him emotionally and behaviorally. Creating and implementing this behavior plan, like I said, is going to keep everybody safe. It's going to make sure that nobody's getting rocks thrown at them or books thrown across the room. And then I'm also showing respect to all parties in this case, which models really well for the students. So me being respectful of Carl, me being respectful of his family, of the opinions of my teachers, models for the students the respect that I expect them to show. If as a superintendent you treat Carl as a problem, then every other kid in the school is going to start treating Carl as a problem too. And I don't want to make Carl a social pariah. That's definitely not going to help his behavior. So modeling this respectfulness is what you should be doing for all students. And then finally, how do we make better teachers out of this case? So Mrs. Taylor is going to be able to better instruct her students with less interruptions, so that's going to make her a better teacher. She's also going to learn about a new learner that maybe she hasn't worked with before, so that's really going to help her out in the future and knowing how to work with students who maybe have similar challenges. And then Ms. Green, the same thing. She's going to better know how to assist students in the future because of her work on this case. Thank you so much for watching.